My name is Dan Line. I'm with the Global Tech and Media Practice for CBRE. Zach's been just all at once archivist and historian, and his depth and knowledge of the island is just tremendous. So really appreciate you giving that intro. And also I want to maybe suggest Brett Opie has an entire row of stairs in front of him with seats. So if anybody wants to just take over some of that, please feel free to come up.
Aisle seats right here.
So, don't be shy. So I get really excited about introducing this great group of people in front of us today, in large part because not only are they just incredibly smart, big risk takers, and have been such an important part of the fabric of Chicago and both the business and cultural community, but they're contributors. You know, these are people who give to community, and this conversation wouldn't be the same without them because thanks to so many people also here in the audience, Goose Island isn't on life support. It's in great recovery. Our friends at North Branch Works and Mike and so many of the other partners out here, which you'll hear at UI Labs and Wrigley and Kendall, there's an incredible future and more of a future than possibly most places in the United States right now. So with that, I want to introduce Matt Garrison with the R2 companies. Matt's been on just a meteoric rise with R2 companies. He's had a tremendous career as a founder of campus housing with a history as a principal and on the investment side, as well as on the asset management side. The portfolio that R2 companies is managing right now with its lofted collaborative thesis is just knocking it out of the park in the city. And it's because of their investment in Goose Island that there's a lot of excitement that's associated with what we're talking about today. So thanks, Matt, for agreeing to be on the panel today. Carolyn, you hold a special place in my heart. I've known Carolyn for almost 12 years. I met Carolyn when she's super smart. She's a doctor and an MBA. She's got lots of acronyms after her name. But she was running a startup called Sanagene. And there weren't many startups in the healthcare space, like you could count on one hand. And but in her spare time, she was trying to figure out how to solve the lack of early stage capital and seed stage investment for all companies in Chicago. So she ended up transitioning over to a great early stage venture fund called Arch Ventures, and then moved on in her career to Sickich Capital, and now is the ambassador and leading the charge on what I think a lot of people have heard of, which is UI Labs and DMDII, but we're really excited to have Carolyn here today to share more about that, because it's also just a massive partner in driving not just that particular project, but eyes and foot traffic and other collaborators onto the island. So thanks for being here, Carolyn. Really appreciate it. And Mike Drew, who's quite possibly the godfather of the Goose, is just his history and development is just known by so many. He's taken on just hairy and gnarly challenges and just turned them into diamonds. Obviously you're going to hear a little bit about Kendall College, the Sara Lee project. Also, Mike is responsible for really helping to build out that first outer ring of the Goose as well with his new city development project, which is so critical because the island just can't be an island. It needs to be surrounded. We have all this great talent, but what's happening around it is going to play in and feed to its entire success. So I want to thank Mike for being here as well. So, my job is to kind of take a step back here, but ask a few just basic questions. I'll lob the first one at you, Mike. You somehow saw something that a lot of people had not seen in the Goose. And it was back before Sara Lee got redeveloped, and it was that very challenging looking structure that Zach. What did you see there that made you want to throw your time, your energy, your capital at it that no one else saw? And then what was the role of the partners that were around you, including the city, in helping you put that together?
Is anybody from the city here tonight?
He's a huge important partner, so great, thank you for coming.
All right, thank you. So I don't know, probably stupidity. What did we see there? So we were attracted to that property, Riverworks, because it was a great loft building. You saw the previous photo. It had been a neglect, but it was a dry storage building. So It had high ceilings, it had a 65-foot deep floor plate, which made for perfect conversion to lofts. This was during the 90s when loft living was really moving into the mainstream. People liked the idea of living in lofts because the volume was so great, it felt bigger. The problem with the typical loft building is they were very deep. This was shallow, so you would have had 2 bays per unit of 15-foot high windows with a view of the skyline. So that was what attracted us to it, and also the existing zoning. It was zoned for work-live lofts. Now that was a designation that somebody's idea was that wouldn't it be great if artists and sculptors could work and live in their space. It took a few years before people realized that artists and sculptors don't have any money, so they can't pay rent. But it was a great idea. And so the previous owner had gotten this zoning in 1986, and so our plan was to do corporate lofts, to do work-live and do extended stay lofts for the corporations that were located in the city. And so we started our plans and we submitted them to the city and waited for our prompt review on the permit, and we never heard anything. And so we kind of made inquiries and we just couldn't get anywhere. And it turned out that we had run smack dab into the first restrictive zoning called the PMD. That was 1991, and Goose Island was the first area that was designated as a planned manufacturing district. Now, the zoning was in place for this. It was grandfathered in. We were south of North Branch. It had all the features of a conversion, and we could have done it, but we were told that well, you have to file suit against the city because the zoning's in place, and it'll be a quick 60-day decision. Well, after about a year of waiting for a response on it, we finally got the idea, and we shifted gears and tried to develop it as a commercial location. And we were fortunate enough that Sara Lee Bakery came out they were looking to move back in from the suburbs, and they came out. Because of the zoning, they were able to do their bakery and test kitchens along with their headquarters. And it was kind of funny when Goldie Wolf, he couldn't get Goldie to get out of the car and climb up into that building that you saw a picture of, but Sara Lee did, and we signed a lease. And they signed a 15-year lease. They occupied 92% of the space, and then 2 years into the lease, in what was probably the dumbest business decision since Quaker bought Snapple, they buy Earth Grain Bakeries and move down to St. Louis. So now it's an empty building, and even though they're paying rent, we're very nervous about that. Howard Tolman, the classic serial entrepreneur, drives by one day, been hired by Kendall College, and he said, they want to buy that property. We had a deal done in 90 days, and they moved to Kendall College there and became a culinary school.
One of Howard's 80 lives brought him into that.
Exactly.
You know, I think Zach Kukovic said it best. You know, this is a massive study in urbanization, you know, both at the macro and the micro level. You know, Matt, with our 2 companies, you're really out there with the North Branch River campus, building what is one of the most unique campus environments, with this close proximity to the urban epicenter of a major U.S. city. It's a very rare time that you can get all of that in one package. You know, maybe talk about what drew you. You've had a great development profile in the River West and the West Loop. What drew you over to the Goose, and what are the things the challenges that accompany not just with building the campus that you're building, but also with building the brand. You know, we're talking about Goose Island 2.0, a re-envisioning of it. It's a really important thing to remark, which everybody here is an ambassador for.
Yeah, so as we recovered from the 2009 downturn, we were able to find a lot of opportunities, value-add opportunities, kind of on the edges of good neighborhoods, and buy some buildings and work on really cool projects, cleaning them up. And we did that with 5 or 6 buildings, and then those opportunities started to dry up and not really exist anymore. So we were thinking, and I write a letter at the end of every year to all our partners and investors, and we say, what are we going to do next? And we kind of talked about the concept of you throw a rock in a pond and it makes circles, and there's one circle out and there's maybe a second circle out. So where does that second circle out go where not everyone is investing and trying to bid everything up, and maybe there's opportunity for it to be the next leg of value creation? And when we were looking at that, we looked at Pilsen to the South Loop, the southern parts of the South Loop, and then obviously West Fulton Market, kind of west of Ashland. And then we looked at Goose Island, and we said, and they're all priced kind of similarly. Those prices have moved a little bit recently, but they were all priced similarly at the time. And we thought between those three, Goose Island was the most compelling from a financial standpoint, from a standpoint of trying to set ourselves up to be rewarded for taking risk, and from a standpoint of being something cool and meaningful that we could work on as a company to try to create a neighborhood and a brand where there was all this potential, but maybe it hadn't been done yet. So we jumped in with the 909 Bliss building, and then we said we need to buy this 3-acre parcel across the street, which has a boatyard on it. So now we operate a boatyard, which I never thought I would say, but that's what we're doing right now. And we think we have a really compelling opportunity for companies to do something that's a special opportunity. I mean, there's not an endless supply of sites like this on Goose Island, or frankly anywhere on the north side. There's going to be some opportunities at the Finkel site. There's opportunities here and there, but it's a special thing that hits a lot of the buttons that people are looking for in the West Loop and Fulton Market, but it's also different. It's an urban campus. It's a little out from the CBD, but it's also in the north side neighborhoods where a lot of people want to live. And there's big open expanses of land and sites in Goose Island that may not exist in some of the more infill locations in the West Loop. So we offer the opportunity for someone to come in and have an urban campus surrounded by the best neighborhoods on the north side of Chicago, to come in and participate in the attractive basis that we have in the investment, and we're going to pass those economics along to the tenant, and have a real identity on Goose Island, maybe coming out of a building like 600 West Chicago, where you're one of 5 or 6 big tenants at 1 million square feet, and saying, we're putting a flag down here, this is our building, and we're going to do this on Goose Island. We think that's compelling, we're really excited about it, and that kind of drove us to make this investment.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think people will find it hard to believe that these two didn't know each other and didn't until actually tonight, and also did, yeah, they knew of, but also didn't know of their individual interests in the Goose until it all kind of happened at the exact same time. I think R2 moved into their investment, R2 companies, just before UI Labs kind of hit. So Carolyn into UI Labs. So, with all the excitement, it's probably, one of the most exciting spots in the city right now, just because of the tremendous well of activity and investment and what you're doing with UI Labs. One, I want you to just tell people what's going on over there, because it's absolutely incredible. And when we think about this, it has to be thought of in a greater context of the amount of eyes that are going on. And I was over at the groundbreaking with Senator Durbin, the mayor, the governor. The president spoke about it multiple times in speeches. It's got a lot of investment from both the federal government, the state, the city. So Carolyn's in a kind of precarious position that she's always navigating, but she's running a tremendous project. Tell us about UI Labs, and also tell us about the unique kind of micro issues associated with placemaking, with design, and the type of environment you're building for the participants that are being a part of UI Labs.
Well, first of all, thanks for the opportunity to be here. I was telling some of the folks on our team, I talk about technology a lot. I talk about collaboration a lot. I rarely get a chance to talk about our place, and I think placemaking is such an important part of what we're doing. So first, really briefly, what UI Labs is. We are fundamentally a collaboration platform. The idea is that we're this neutral ground for where the best and brightest talent can work together to figure out how to make the future real today. And the idea is if we bring the best university minds, innovators, entrepreneurs, along with some of the best companies in the world, the most innovative startup companies in the world, and government when it makes sense, that they can work together to bring things out of the research lab and bring them to the marketplace. So we're about really trying to kind of bridge that valley of death for technologies that so often sit on the shelf and don't quite make it into the market. And so our partners help us do this. So our partners are some of the government entities that Dan spoke about, but then we also have over 30 university partners, some of the best engineering schools in the world, and we also have a number of large and small companies. So companies like GE and Procter & Gamble and Boeing and Dow and others who've said we need to come together if we want to really transform an industry. So our first industry we're tackling is manufacturing. And when we set out to figure out where we were going to do this, we said, well, we need to actually have a working manufacturing floor. If we want to show people the future of manufacturing, we've got to show them, what that looks like. Bring manufacturing equipment, old equipment and new equipment, and show how you make old equipment smart and what new equipment can actually do. And so finding the place to make this happen, and it's actually interesting because it was days apart that I think our announcements happened, and people were giving me credit for like, wow, the Goose Island's already going up. I'm like, what? I definitely knew it's completely independent things, and I'm sure you were getting some of the same things.
It was all skill in it was 100% skill.
You knew that it was all happening.
100% luck.
But it is funny that they happened days apart. We may have been the only ones who actually noticed that was the case, but we looked at in the Central Business District. I mean, that's where we thought we needed to be. We talked to our companies, our partners, and said, we've got to be in the middle of everything. But one of the interesting things, our small and mid-sized manufacturers told us, but we'd like to drive there. And we said, okay, well, driving to the loop may not be as accessible, and so maybe we don't think about right in the loop. We think on the outskirts, and we looked at some of the same places that Matt talked about, and the place that fit all the different criteria, and we can go into that later if that makes sense, was to do this on Goose Island and to take a, at that time, vacant manufacturing facility and renew it, bring it back to life. And so we've completely transformed it. If you've driven past North Avenue past the Goose Island lately, you'll see that there's now glass covering our front wall where there used to be metal and framing a loading dock. And so we're really trying to juxtapose this idea of the future and what we think of as manufacturing, and that's been really fun as part of the placemaking. So this will be a place that has, we've got a 100,000 square foot footprint. About a third of that is going to be a manufacturing floor, and about so on day one there'll be about 20,000 square feet of manufacturing space that will be working, and then we've got a lot of open collaboration space and office space where our partners can hang out. So we want this to really be a destination. That's what UI Labs is all about, creating a destination for talent and technology.
That's great. That's fantastic. Who can you name some of the partners that are involved as well, taking space in there or as partners financially? Well, stay with the financial part, but whatever you're comfortable with articulating. So
part of being a member in UI Labs, or one of our programs, is the idea that you have a place to convene. And so when our partners, like I mentioned, when GE comes to town and they want to talk about manufacturing, obviously they've got their own presence here, but they can also, if they want to talk to some of our other partners, we're a place they can go. We also have a number of small and mid-sized companies. Right now we actually have some space within our space that we always thought we would build out ourselves, but the cry from the community was maybe we should build it out in collaboration with the community. And so I know there's several folks in the room who are already thinking about how we might use that space, but we've got about 25,000 square feet that we're thinking we could turn into a place where we do bring in partners from the community.
So I encourage everybody to lob in questions. This is supposed to be interactive, so please, aside from throwing peanuts at me, just throw something at the panelists. So let's talk about a couple harder things here, right? So the great part about the Goose is that there's this incredible vision, all this excitement, but there's some challenges, right? I was driving around last night at midnight on the Goose because that's what I do, and the least of which is street lighting. There's a lot bigger problems out there. Mike, what are those challenges, and should we look at that as a chance to build from the ground up and capitalize on this next generation of a fantastic vision for a tech campus, next generation digital manufacturing, big fiber infrastructure, big transportation infrastructure opportunities. What's it going to take to get there from here?
Well, you just answered the question.
Yeah.
It's some of the challenges are certainly fiber to the island, and that's today's highway for commerce, and to attract the businesses and uses that we're talking about has to be adequate. It has to be the best, and there's some challenges getting that fiber there. I know Comcast is there, but it's there's some difficulty there. The other more mundane but just as big a challenge is the infrastructure, namely the roads. You have a use on the island that is largely logistics based. You have FedEx, you have CTA warehouse, you have rumored to be Amazon supposed to be coming in somewhere on the island. So you have a lot of trucking, you have a lot of over-the-road hauling, and the roads are inadequate. They have been for a very long time. One of the previous large landowners is here tonight. Larry Adelson was with CMC. You saw all those pictures of all of the rail spur. That was some 40 acres they controlled on the site. There was a plan commissioned by them that called for extending the Eastman Street Bridge over the channel to provide some east-west relief traffic and take some of the load off Division and North Avenue. Eastman, coincidentally, is the street that we've extended through to Ogden at the new city development. So there's a traffic light at Halsted and Eastman, as well as Ogden and Clybourne. So reintroducing that street grid will help get access to the island. Division right now is a nightmare. They've upgraded the North Avenue and the Division Bridge, but you still have uses that are in conflict. If you make it difficult to get on or off the island, and you're competing with trucks and you're competing with a lot of different uses, that's a challenge that has to be addressed.
Yeah, I know the city's extremely excited, and has a long history of taking on those challenges, so they're going to be great partners in it. But I do, also want to talk about the infrastructure and what it drives. And Matt, you just nailed it, and Zach in the talk. This is about talent, and how people get in and out of the Goose. The campus is just inspirational. And the bridge is even just, if anybody doesn't recall, those are old footings that exist there for the Ogden Street Bridge, and our two companies is planned for the building of a pedestrian and bike bridge. Matt, talk about the transportation components and really about the talent that swells up and down all of the Milwaukee corridor, Lincoln Park, and River North.
Yeah, so you're young grads out of the Big Ten. They want to live on the north side of Chicago in these neighborhoods, and I think companies have recognized that, and in an effort to be able to recruit these employees, they've relocated downtown from the suburbs, and it's a trend we're seeing more and more of. So, with regard to infrastructure and accessibility on Goose Island, there certainly are some challenges. Obviously, the streetscape, CDOT, the sidewalks, things like that are a challenge. Access to public transportation is a challenge. I think what's really interesting about it is the amount of investment that has occurred there in spite of all those challenges without anything even necessarily being done about them. You look at the Wrigley Innovation Center, I think that was $50 or $60 million. You look at Kendall on the other end, and then a lot of medium-sized projects in the middle. So what we want to do is figure out, okay, if we got all that investment without addressing these challenges, how do we optimize Goose Island to get the next level of investment, to get the investment to accelerate? Fixing the streets, fixing the sidewalks, we think that's going to be easy. We're talking to the city about it. We're going to fix them around our projects, and I think that challenge is going to be overcome. Access to public transportation, we'd love a Goose Island L stop, but that's probably not going to happen right now in this environment, but we realized in studying the problem that we have a couple L stops that aren't that far away, less than a half mile, really in three directions. We talk about two of them, North and Clybourne to the north, and then Chicago and Milwaukee to the south. We also have Division in Milwaukee directly to the west. So there's 3. Division in Milwaukee, you can walk to it. It's down Division, so that's not a big deal. The other 2 are separated by a body of water because it's a river. So what's a low impact way that we can connect to the existing public transportation infrastructure? We think it's bridges. It's pretty ambitious to say we're gonna build a bridge, from our property, and we don't even own the land on the other side of the property, but here's a rendering of it, and this is what we're gonna do. But number one, we think we can do it. It's not that expensive to do. It's a pedestrian cycle bridge, and it's tapping into $100 million of CTA infrastructure. It makes sense. If you can do that for $3 million or $4 million or $5 million, I think that makes a lot of sense. And it's also aspirational. It's metaphorically, it's a bridge to Goose Island. It's a way to get people thinking about Goose Island and how we solve these kinds of problems. And we think that's going to be one of the solutions, but we're engaging with people, and we think there's a lot of other solutions that we'll come up with as well. But I think the underlying theme is, look what's happened here without this stuff. Imagine what's going to happen when we start to optimize this stuff.
Yeah, I think Matt Gray would appreciate me bringing up, the amenities and what it's going to take, just not just here in Chicago, but what it takes to build a scaled campus environment like this and re-envision the Goose. We can't all be fortunate enough to be Kendall with a cooking college right there, and which brings me to the Division Street Shrimp Shack, and I'm an expert on it. I was a starving grad student, and I can attest to the fried clams there. They're awesome. But Carolyn, what's that?
And cheap.
They're phenomenal.
Like
They're unbelievable. Go, run, don't walk. So, but Carolyn, you've got bodies out there. I mean, people are looking for the amenities. They're already starting to say, like, where am I walking? And I've got to walk to the Shrimp Shack or to new city development. What are the other amenities that you're hearing or that you see? Like, look, we really need to start addressing this now. The city needs to start attracting and thinking about these components.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, our team first saw the renderings, and I told Nate earlier, the first thing he said, oh, there's going to be a coffee shop. I said, well, maybe not yet, but we're hoping you guys take care of that. But it's a really fair question. It's something that we're all trying to work through. So around our office, we refer to, as you say, the Goose. We call it Innovation Island. That's I squared. I don't know.
We can both do the same.
We'll work on the branding. Right. But part of the idea is that we were looking at it's innovation all around. So what we do, our business is about innovation, but where else can we think about being creative? And I think, Matt, you raised some really good points about who says we can build a bridge? Well, why not? Let's just go say we're going to go build it. And I think that's kind of the approach that we've taken, which is, let's make the best of this. Let's think about how we can get creative. Let's think about how we can get innovative. How can we use the water taxi stop that's there to use that as an attraction point when some of our partners are coming from the loop? Or, how can we think about, creating that as the destination. So maybe they're all staying, because many of our partners will be flying in to come visit us. They'll be staying downtown in the Central Business District, but we get them on a little mini bus and we bring them to their destination. That gives us a captive audience, so that's good too. But thinking about how we can work with the vendors, whether that's food or fiber, to think about how we can create more buzz around what we're doing. For us, as it relates to the fiber side, our whole business is about data. Fundamentally, data and how we use it to inform our business decisions. And so we can't do very much without fiber. That was actually a really big question we got asked really early on, and I'm sure it'll rise up as we move in later on this spring, which is, how are you getting the kind of speed that you need to be able to store or transfer the data? And so we've been partnering with Comcast and with others, and Sunesis and others, to think about how do we capture the amount of speed that we need, and so how do we develop the use cases so that we understand, how can you press fiber to its limits, which is never going to happen because it's almost limitless. But really think about what are those use cases for big data that will enable more companies to take advantage of this location, where now we're going to be having that fiber infrastructure coming in.
So, and I've got to ask, just because there's such a change going on, are your neighbors, the kitchen appliance folks, or the restaurant appliance folks, did you get to know them? Have you knocked on their
Yes,
door?
we
Have you
are
gotten to know those
members
folks? Right,
of-
fantastic. That's fantastic. I mean, I ask in the context of, and maybe this is, I want to encourage questions, so I'll just toss a total fastball at Mike Drew. But, you know, and we're all friends here, so you can just kind of comment on the PMD itself in the context of past and, you know, sort of forward-thinking vision. But organ rejection on the island with the neighbors and a lot of the good stewardship that accompanies being a new owner, operator, investor. You know, can you talk about that a little bit and how you see that all working out, Mike?
Is that a knuckleball or a fastball? So I believe that we're working with companies like logistics companies, C.H. Robinson, Coyote, and the reason that they're in the city is because of the workforce and the access to the workforce. Like Matt said, the young professionals, the young graduates, they want to live in the city. They want to have access to all the amenities that the city offers. They want to be able to use public transportation, leave their car parked. So all of these things leads to a good, solid workforce, and that's why you see the Googles moving back into the city. It's the workforce, that's the greatest asset we have. And I believe that zoning policy, whether it's called a PMD or whether it's retitled empowerment zones or employment zones, that should be the focus, less on the use and more on what creates employment. So then you get to the question of what amenities are necessary. Well, if you're a young, you're part of the young workforce, what do you want? You want all the amenities that are now being built into spaces like this. I mean, this is a cool space. I feel like I'm in Hoosiers or something with the bleachers. But they want all the amenities that come with today's employment, and that has to be accommodated on the island, has to be accommodated by means of open space, by parks, by pedestrian bridges, by river walks, all stuff that may be a bit of a conflict with the old view of manufacturing, where they didn't want any of that. They didn't want to encourage that. It's the current PMDs happen to exist along the river because that was the form in the 1800s of transportation. That was the main form. There's only 2 or 3 users now who use it for shipping, and it's now, the river is an amenity, a recreational amenity for the city, and it's one of our best assets. And so there's a conflict there with the existing zoning. So I think it needs to be revisited and it needs to be looked at in the form of employment zones.
So can I open it up for questions? I'm sure that there's some thoughts out there that maybe you want to share with the panel, or please, your name and then lob it in.
My name is Peter.
Awesome.
And,
Welcome, Peter.
So, you know, we've talked a lot about the business aspects of what's being built on the island, and I guess one of the things that really hasn't been touched on at all is the residential side of things. When you look at downtown metropolitan areas, you know, Chicago, the Loop itself, there's been a ton of residential that's kind of popped up all in and around downtown, and it didn't used to be that way. And it's now because people want to walk to work where they live, and so with this rejuvenation of Goose Island, I'm kind of curious from your standpoint. Do you see a lot of residential being mixed into that with all this other stuff that's going on?
I'm going to leave it to my real estate friends to say something.
Is your question, do I see it happening or do I think it should happen? I'll answer the first one. Do I see it happening? Not quickly. The existing zoning is built to protect the manufacturing that's in those locations, and it made perfect sense. When you had a Finkel that was operating a foundry and you had an encroaching residential component coming from both Bucktown to the west and Lincoln Park to the east, they needed some protection. They had such an investment in there. They had a number of jobs. So that was one of the primary reasons behind the PMD, also called protected manufacturing. Today's change in use, which is like Carolyn's project, the Google headquarters, all of that is it's funny. I think back to when Filipowski was looking to locate Divine's headquarters on the island where Wrigley ended up. They actually supposedly modified the zoning policy to allow for the manufacture of ideas because it was about manufacturing. And Flip didn't make anything, but he was a great idea guy. So those uses, since they're about employment and they're about workforce, they need amenities that need to complement those uses and not compete with them. And that's where I think that the amenities that you refer to, including some residential, including some hospitality, if Carolyn has visitors from international visitors, wouldn't it be nice to have a hotel not downtown but somewhere on the island? If you have a workforce that is located on the island and they have children, wouldn't it be nice to have schools that they could actually put their kids in while they're working? So it's a whole different, you got to turn it on its head and look at it as a whole different approach to zoning, in my opinion. Will it happen? I don't know. That's a bigger challenge.
Larry, you got to have a lot of thoughts on all this.
Well,
Please.
I just want to point out, I'm Larry Abelson. I was early with Mike on Goose Island, and I fought with the guy who I'm sitting voluntarily next to.
Right.
And you know, I think a big part of us is to try to take the right attitude and accommodate. And I think what's being done now is wonderful, very forward-looking.
Yeah.
And you have to look at what you like to be there, look at what the intended forces are, and figure out how you accommodate. So Mike and I can sit next to each other.
Yeah.
Anything is.
Both great stewards for the island.
You know, if I could just maybe add a point on there, because obviously we're focused on manufacturing, and so for us, the way we look at it is, what's the next generation of manufacturing? How do we make manufacturing cool again, and do it in a way that really embraces the next generation workforce? And we're seeing actually several of our employees at UI Labs have actually moved to the surrounding neighborhoods. Another one signed a lease in the Ukrainian Village just this week because of the proximity. And so I think we're really excited to see what happens in the way that the community Goose Island embraces us, but how we can also look to the communities around us as well. Personally, I'm excited to walk to work too.
So short of getting the PMD change, which you thought was 9 days in terms of the number, what type of tenant mix do you think is going to be allowed within the current PMD zoning?
Yeah, so our view as people who've made a pretty big investment there is we're going to play within the existing framework and rules and do the best job we can to optimize it. The PMD allows for high-tech office. The definition of high-tech office, I think, has been handled in a way that allows a relatively wide variety of uses to classify as that. And I've worked with Michael and a lot of the different stakeholders in the various PMD districts and spoken to them. And I think they recognize that the PMD of tomorrow may not look like the PMD of 10 or 15 years ago. And we're talking about manufacturing intellectual property and technology and things like that, and we're also manufacturing things, but it's both. I think if you look at the transition of what's happening on Goose Island, it's kind of a pretty good representation of that right now with DMDI, with Wrigley having their innovation center, and hopefully with the tenants that we're going to put in there.
A couple of questions. Is there a master plan for the island, and if not, should there be? And are there any thoughts on the manner in which, or if the waterfront should be addressed?
Yeah.
Long-term view of the development of the island?
I'm not aware of a master plan. There may be one, Michael.
We're working on one.
Yeah,
for Finkel.
they're working on one for Finkel right now, and then maybe we'll work on one there. With the riverfront, we own land on the riverfront, and we're looking to buy more land on the riverfront. And you have to do a river walk now, and it has to be a planned development. And you have to take it to the city. and do a 30-foot setback for the Riverwalk and put in the Riverwalk. So we're going to do that on our land, and that's going to be a good start. And we're going to try to buy other land along the river and do it. We've got a lot of wood to chop to link it all together because there's a ComEd substation that put $100 million of power infrastructure right along the river. Probably not going to be able to do anything about that. We got to play the hand we're dealt, but we're gonna clean it up and put that stuff in. And I'm gonna personally, and our company is personally gonna try to start a conversation about how we do optimize this. Going back to what I talked on before, from a branding standpoint, from how we face the market standpoint, and hopefully from a planning standpoint and infrastructure standpoint.
Yeah, I wish John McClendon was here because it seems like just yesterday that Centrum was going to redevelop the old Montgomery Ward's catalog factory, right? And people were just, oh, how's that going to happen? And then the city stepped in because of its interest in redeveloping the Riverwalk, and I don't know what the exact, it was 29 million or something to redevelop. So the precedent is there, and without that investment, that project would have had some real challenges. But now look at it. I mean, 600 West, which is literally just a block and a half from the campus we're talking about here, is in all aspects has been the northern lights of Chicago's tech, innovation, and venture scene with Lightbank, Groupon, Belly, VSA Partners. The list just goes on. Nate worked over there for a while before this great structure here, but it's that's literally just a stone's throw away right there. It'll be really great to see what it looks like in 2, 3, 4 years from now, the structures. Anybody else? Any questions? Back in the corner.
How will geese be treated?
Wow, Mike Holder.
Very humanely. They're out there.
Yeah.
We were out there last year cleaning up the island, and got some great pictures of geese walking across where your project is going to be. They're out there.
We're still going to have the lawn out
Garden
front,
geese.
so we've got a home for them still.
I think to Steve's question about the master plan, there isn't a master plan, but I think there's an opportunity to come up with a vision, citywide vision of what the new manufacturing is like, how the current zoning policies get adjusted to attract the best and brightest in manufacturing. Where the UI Labs is a first step, but it's just a small, relatively small, 100,000 feet on the middle of an island. So I think the big vision, and someone from the city needs to convey it, is the next big opportunity is Finkel, 40 acres on the river between two very vibrant communities. What could it be? It can be a huge campus for R&D, for tech, for any number of things, but there needs to be a vision conveyed, and it needs to be, with all due respect to Micah, it doesn't need to be site-specific. It's a grander vision. What is Chicago going to look like in the next century? And we talk about it, but the current zoning policies, in my opinion, are dragging far behind it. So redevelopment happens almost on its own, not with a specific vision.
Please, Scott.
Tell me about your timeline. I mean, there isn't a master plan for the whole island, but the master plan for Bliss and the Boatyard.
Yeah.
Sort of a timeline. What do you foresee there? Light manufacturing. What are your thoughts?
So we bought the building about 18 months ago. We had a 24-month sale leaseback with the seller that's up at the end of the year. Our intention at this point in time is to move forward with the project at that point in time, with or without a tenant. We're also in talks with tenants, and we think it's very likely that we may have a tenant by then. Most of the tenants we're talking to are more in the category of high-tech office and not necessarily manufacturing. That being said, we're open to doing anything there that makes sense. The site across the street is a little bit more ambitious. It's a ground-up, much more expensive development. We can't draft on the fact that we bought a building way below replacement costs, so that may take more time. In the interim, it's going to be part of the campus. We're going to complete the Riverwalk. It's going to probably be some parking for the 909 Bliss building. and then hopefully we build that second phase at some point in time in the future. And we're going to continue to try to get the bridge built. We've met with the Coast Guard, we've met with the Army Corps of Engineers. There's like alphabet soup of
a lot of interesting
governmental
parties involved in that
agencies you have to
bridge.
meet with to build a bridge. But we're going to try to figure out how to do that, and we're going to probably write the first check for it and try to raise some money for it and kind of make it a cool public-private project and make something happen there. And then thirdly, we're in active talks to try to acquire more sites on Goose Island. There's a limited supply of inventory. We think it's like 60 to 70% kind of stabilized by big users like Mars Wrigley and Mercedes and people like that. We think there's maybe 30 or 40% of it that is kind of infill and kind of in play to be redeveloped, and we want to play a big part in that and continue to invest there. So we're out actively trying to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting to note, just working for a large real estate services firm, when you hear a lot of chatter internally, there's just so much excitement about what's going on the Goose and in the North Branch River campus. Probably not since 600 West was put up and really kicking on all cylinders.
I just one more, do you see any other projects like this around the country, or what kind of lessons can you learn from here that you can apply to Seattle and Boston? Or do you see anything similar going on?
You like me to answer it, or would you like the Matt? Okay,
Yes, sir.
so
That's the best
you know,
way.
it's very rare that you have opportunities in this close proximity to an already established large urban, dense metro. I think the places that I think of when I hear about projects like this, 160 acres surrounded by water, literally surrounded then by an island of talent, its own, or not an island, but rings of talent all around. I think of places outside of our country, London, Tech City area. I think of Singapore, other places around the globe. This is really, and Matt Gray was articulating the best, this is really a dynamic place and time that the Goose is sprouting up. And it shouldn't be thought of just on the soil here in the neighborhood or in Chicago. It's really a big deal in the U.S. and across the globe. Anybody? Please.
My name is Casey Wakeham. I'm with the Township of Commerce. We service Grand Division, and I'm really interested in the pedestrian bridge over to Chicago. Have you spoken at all with the
I'm sorry, with whom?
Have you spoken at all with the cement company?
We have actually, yeah.
No way.
The first conversation didn't go great, but I mean, it's the first of many conversations that ultimately they've got a business there that supplies all the cement to the city of Chicago, and it's hugely profitable, and they've been there for a long time, and probably don't want to go anywhere, and they probably shouldn't go anywhere. But they also own 10 acres of land along the river there that's going to probably double in value when I put that bridge there. So, I think there's a way forward, and if it's not there, then maybe it's someplace else. But we're going to try to figure it out and figure out light footprint, high impact ways to solve the transportation challenges.
Great question.
Thanks.
You got it?
About just as far as UI Labs, I'm curious, just if you could go a little deeper about like how you're working with. You said you're working with both startup companies and companies, more innovative in manufacturing. I'm curious, kind of, what's the end goal for these companies, and what's UI Labs creating on kind of the grander scale in this innovation island?
So if there's what do we do and what do we hope that what we do actually enables and fosters further? And so,
how are you helping these companies get more established on the startup side? This being a community that has a lot of startup companies, that'd be of interest. And also, what are you doing with the other companies as well?
yeah, so our primary business is to help design and to curate research projects, applied research projects. So what that means is not the kind of stuff that you'd see within the universities or within a national lab, but probably not at the same stage of maturity you'd see within a corporation. So, when we design these projects, we basically define the problem. So in our case with manufacturing, what are the problems manufacturers are having? And then set out a project call for people to pose potential solutions, and then to develop funding, and we match that funding. And so we are hoping to bring the startup community into those projects through the teams that are forming to get funded and then actually carry out the work. Now, that's what we do. However, we think there's a lot of indirect effects that will happen because of that too. So I alluded before, there's actually, we've been working with World Business Chicago and the Illinois Science and Technology Coalition to develop a request for interest to understand, what interest is there in the more earlier stage entrepreneurial community for a manufacturing innovation hub, and trying to determine whether that's something that makes sense to co-locate with us. And so that RFI is out there right now. Responses are due this weekend, and that's part of our. We're just a year old, so we're trying to get information and understand what is the role we can play in the community. And one of the roles we think we can play is an ecosystem building. And so that's the ecosystem with the startups, and it's also, as we talked about earlier, the ecosystem around us. And so what does that mean for other companies to want to set up operations in Chicago, to be close to what's going on so that they can be thinking about not only the talent, but also the technologies that are coming out of the projects that we're doing. Hope that helps.
Yes. Thanks.
We have one more question, and we can probably wrap it up. And I can ask that question. Awesome. So, open slate, near term, long term, what's next? Matt, in less than a minute, what are we going to see in the next year and the next 10 years?
If I was just going to pick one phrase, I would say figure out a way to optimize the environment to attract continued investment moving forward that we've already attracted.
Great.
Branding, infrastructure, and ecosystem.
Well, the first thing, we're just excited. So near term, we're excited to move in because we're actually not on those yet. So we'll start there. But long term, I think the questions tonight were really helpful. I really liked your question about the master plan, because actually we've been talking with a number of groups about how to start developing something, and I suspect my fellow panelists will be interested in that too. So let's see what we can do together. Chicago is we all know is a really big small town. So I think there's definitely a lot of people passionate about this project and excited what's going to happen.
Mike?
So the city will, after the election, they'll come out with this great vision, and we're going to address all of the issues with the existing zoning, and we're going to make Goose Island to be everything that it possibly could be as the major corporate headquarters for all of the leaders in the high-tech industry.
Just mic drop. Right there. So I want everybody to give a big round of applause for our panelists. Over at Built Worlds, Zach Kukovic, who's done just an awesome job working with the Built Worlds team, and thanks very much, and look forward to seeing you again, another great Built Worlds presentation and program.